recording with Miss Clare Lopez. It's been a minute, and today is Friday, February 10th, 2023 at 2:04 p.m. Eastern time for episode 1082, 3. I don't even know anymore. But it's been a while since I've had you on, and that's entirely my own fault, as you and I are trying to arrange a special podcast. But for all the new listeners, Miss Lopez, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. Glad to be back with you, and as always, to catch up with you again.
So for anyone that doesn't know, you did work at the Central Intelligence Agency for, I believe, 20 years doing analysis, and you have a wealth of knowledge really on any and every topic we talk about. And seeing as how for the first time, probably since like Sputnik, we had a foreign communist power in our airspace. Well, technically, Sputnik was space. I figure why not talk about it? This is a rather big one,
Yeah.
though it is a balloon and not a satellite. Nonetheless, it was a. Has there ever been? I mean, since 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, has there ever been an incursion in U.S. airspace this
Well,
brazen?
yes, actually. I think many people perhaps don't know about this, but in the year 2012 and again in 2016, if I've got the dates right, North Korea launched, respectively, two satellites that pass over the Western Hemisphere every single day, including over the United States, on a polar trajectory. That means coming up at us from the south, not as you would expect over the northern approaches, that NORAD is supposed to be covering, but rather on this polar trajectory. And what the late and much missed uh, fantastic expert Dr. Peter Vincent Pry explained to me at one point was a fractional orbital bombardment system trajectory. And as Peter told us, we don't know what's in those North Korean satellites. They are of a size and an attitude of flight, and a trajectory that could contain EMPs, electromagnetic pulse weapons. We don't know. But something else that Peter told me is that were it in fact to be an EMP in either one of those, they, at least theoretically, could be remote detonated by a signal sent up to the satellites from Earth. So yes, our airspace, although it's pretty far up in the atmosphere, I mean, much higher than these balloons from the communist Chinese have been flying, but nevertheless, over the United States and the rest of the Western Hemisphere for years now. And nobody really talks about it, do they?
Mm-mm. And I've heard the term before, but could you explain what a fractional orbital bombardment system is?
Yeah, what it means, and this applies to hypersonic cruise missiles and hypersonic glide vehicles also, is that the object in question here, be it a satellite or the hypersonic cruise missile, whatever, kind of skips into and out of the upper atmosphere, between the atmosphere and what we would call space, outer space. And it does that in ways that makes it very difficult to track, to counter, or to shoot down. In addition to which, the hypervelocity of those hypersonic cruise missiles or glide vehicles, the speed at which they travel is also extremely difficult. But this sort of skipping, that's the fractional part. They're fractionally within an orbit and then fractionally back into our atmosphere, in a bouncing kind of a movement, if I understand it correctly. I dearly wish that Peter were still with us, because he would explain it much better than I am. But that's my understanding of it.
So to, no pun intended, I guess bring it back down to earth is from that was terrible, and I apologize. I will self-flagellate myself. I will self-flagellate for that pun.
It's
That is not
okay.
allowed. It is unacceptable. But yeah, so to bring it down from orbit and from hypersonic speeds to a balloon at 60,000 feet. That's considerable altitude, right? It's 10,000 feet lower than a U-2, about twice as high as a commercial airliner. Um, but and I had on, I think last week, Ron Moeller, who was in the CIA paramilitary branch for Air Branch, and he talked about this balloon is unique and that it had, uh, I guess, it was directional. It
It
wasn't
was
wind.
remotely controlled as to its altitude and the direction that it took in
Mm.
flight. Yeah.
So, though wildly different from a satellite, could you maybe explain the threats of this? Why it was or was not, or yeah, why it was not shot down as soon as it went into Canadian or Alaskan airspace? Are we bombarding it with SIGINT, ELINT? Are we trying to get it from it? Are we what was the purpose of allowing this thing to go? When a plane doesn't respond, fighter jets are on its wings relatively soon, but a balloon from the communist or the Chinese Communist Party is allowed to fly for multiple days unmolested. Why is that? Not that you have a crystal ball.
You know, the authorities, national security authorities of the United States and of Canada, both, have been remarkably tight-lipped about any of this. The questions that you've just asked, which are perfectly normal questions. Um, we never did hear anything out of a NORAD official. NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, um, the joint partnership between the United States and Canada to defend, against incursions into North America coming over the Pacific Ocean and then down from that direction, which indeed this balloon just did. So not a peep that I know of out of NORAD, nor did I hear anything from Canadian friends. They were not told as even as citizens, what was going on or that anything was going on. And then our own officials, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, and President Biden himself never did take to the microphones and the cameras at the White House officially to speak to the American people and say, look, this is what's happening. This is what we're doing in response to that incursion by the Chinese Communist Party into our airspace. None of that ever happened. Some questions, were put to President Biden by reporters as he was traveling between and betwixt, and he sent back, some comment about, well, we're going to take care of it. And then we did have a briefing from an Air Force general at some point last week who said something to the effect of to the reporter's question, well, where is it? What position is that balloon in right now as of that point in time of the press conference? And I mean, the arrogance of this general, the absolute disregard for the American people. Well, just look up in the sky, he said, and you'll see it. So we don't know really officially what our national security, Canadian, American, NORAD, knew about the balloon, when they knew about the balloon, and what, if any, countermeasures they took against the balloon. Although I did hear a report, I think it might have been from Jennifer Griffin, from her Pentagon sources, and of course she's a very good reporter with Fox. And at one point, I recall her saying something to the effect that her sources had told her that the U.S. military had disabled any of the intelligence collection SIGINT sensor package on the balloon. But that's not confirmed, and I don't know that it can be or ever will be.
Yeah, in all of my complete lack of expertise, that's the only logical conclusion I could come to, is that it was dead in the air, and in which case it's no threat, and so it's just, let's see what it does. It's making, it's for all the world to see. It's a Chinese incursion into sovereign airspace, and I guess on the geopolitical stage, that's right. That's good anti-China rhetoric. That's the only thing I could really think of, is they completely disabled it, or that they're bombarding it with with false intel or whatever, or they hijacked it and China's too embarrassed to admit it's been hijacked. I don't know.
Well, why would they hijack it
I'm
on a
I'm just
flight course
I'm
that went
throwing things.
directly over, next to, by, nearby some
Well,
of our absolutely most sensitive military installations on the mainland, that is continental United States?
so I don't believe my own theory, but I'm throwing the spaghetti at the wall. If you wanted to make China look bad, and if you disabled it in the air, and it was sending back zero intel, and it's completely under your control, yeah, you'd want to make it look a little belligerent. I'm just looking at it as like the Machiavellian.
Well, what help does that do to the American national security posture, the optics of U.S. national security and leadership coming out of the Pentagon and the White House?
Oh, it
None,
makes them look horrible.
none.
Yeah, no, it
But
look
you know
makes
what?
the
That is exactly the point that I was trying to make in my
okay.
most recent blog site at Newsmax, in Defense of Liberty. It's called, where 2 days ago I published, or they published for me, an article entitled "Yes, China is Probing Our Defenses," and the point that I was making there is that in addition to any intelligence collection objectives the Chinese probably had for this balloon, whether they achieved that or not, don't know. But in addition to those intelligence collection objectives, I think that this was in part, at least, a psychological operation
Sure.
by the CCP to deliberately, number one, allow Americans on the ground to see this great big white balloon and its sensor package hanging off the side, which a citizen in Billings, Montana did, and reported it to local newspaper, which then published his photos and the story about it, which is how it came to the public attention, not by our leadership. So deliberately flew it at an altitude that it would be seen on the ground in continental United States. And then across the entire, width of continental United States, the lower 48, until it exited into U.S. territorial waters off of South Carolina, where it was finally shot down.
Mm-hmm.
But deliberately allowing it to be seen and allowing the American people to see that our leadership, our national security, our president not only tried to keep this from us and hide the truth about what was happening from us, we, the American people, but also chose to do absolutely nothing visible or that they told us about during the entire course of this balloon's trek across the United States. I think the Chinese wanted us to be demoralized
Mm-hmm.
even further, in terms of faith and trust in our institutions. These institutions now, the military and the White House, if we're not already thoroughly discouraged by what we're seeing there.
Sure. I mean, think of the demoralizing effects it had of just unchallenged U.S. Air raids over mainland Japan. There's nothing you can. Your emperor is a god. He cannot stop us. That was a huge part of it. Was where's
Sure.
Hirohito? Where's Tojo?
Hmm.
How come they're not stopping the American beast? It's because you can't, and that has a huge. You don't even have to hit someone with a bomb. They're just looking at that and
But
they're going,
even, even worse this time, it's not because the U.S. military couldn't
well,
stop
yeah.
the
I
balloon.
think that's even worse. Then
It's even worse. You're exactly
you
right. I think
can and you won't.
you chose not to.
Yeah.
You chose to let it fly over the entire United States, continental lower 48.
Which then does get again. I
Well,
have
and
to.
Alaska. I mean,
Yeah.
Alaska first, right?
Yeah.
And then the lower 48.
Yeah. Which then has me, and then I've got, and then there's the entire idea of it wasn't even released until a citizen pointed it out, right? And then they have to come clean and go, oh yeah, we see it too. But then it's also like I get thinking it's all around relatively in the same temporal box as all the classified documents being found at Biden properties. It does kind of look like a groundswell, an astroturf, but nonetheless a groundswell of anti-Biden sentiment. And are they trying to remove? Is this
Mm.
Is this the Democratic power structure trying to remove him? Is it? I don't know. I'm just trying to throw everything at the wall.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, switching over to election politics, it does seem as though the Democrat Party um, would like somebody else other than Joe Biden to be running for the presidency come next year in 2024. But who might that be?
Yeah,
None of them wants the vice president, the current vice president, cackling Kamala, to be the candidate. Then where do they go?
yeah,
And so that's a process that the Democrat Party is I guess trying to work through now. They don't have much of a bench to work with either.
yeah. So that's just like another idea I've been toying with. Is it seems like they're trying to make him appear impotent. Because I mean, at very face value, so we know that we could shoot it down. That's not a question.
Hmm.
This isn't
Hmm.
the '50s with
And
Sputnik, where
there were many unpopulated areas the balloon
yeah,
flew over before it got to the more populated, central United States, eastern seaboard.
yeah,
The areas up around the Aleutian Islands, around Alaska.
yeah,
Um, what about as it skipped down the western coast of Canada?
yeah.
What about the wide open spaces of Montana
Montana,
or
yeah,
some of those western states?
yeah. It gets close to ICBM side. I mean, if it gets, I mean, it should stand to reason if it gets close to Offutt Air Force Base or Malmstrom Air Force Base, you wouldn't care if it is over a city. You'd say there's a greater risk. You right? If it go back to 9/11, you'd shoot down that plane over, New Jersey, just so it wouldn't reach Manhattan, right? So we know that this isn't the '50s when rocket technology is relatively new and we couldn't do anything about Sputnik. That's different.
Hmm. Hmm.
We could. So
And
we know,
China wanted us to see, we, the American people, to see that we could have, but our
didn't.
leadership chose not to, and to leave us exposed and leave our sensitive military sites exposed, etc.
So again, in the flow chart of thought, I have to look at it and go, okay, it's not because we can't. So
Hmm.
why didn't we? Is it as simple as Biden and the military structure are controlled by China? I'm like, all right, well that's a little convenient for me because that's exactly what I want to hear is they're evil. Is it is it to remove Biden? Is this our own power structure going, yeah, it's not a threat, but let's make Biden look bad? Is this just another piece in a puzzle to put the world on more of an anti-Chinese sentiment? Where did COVID come from? 3 years later, sovereign airspace incursion.
Well,
Are they moving on
you
Taiwan?
speaking of the rest of the world, I think that's a really good point about this to bring up. And that is that, yeah, the entire world, our friends and allies, but our adversaries too, were watching this whole thing because it was on live stream television for days.
Yeah,
Um, and, what kind of a message does this send the mullahs in Iran, a Putin in the Kremlin, a Xi Jinping, who's, contemplating his own strategy for taking over Taiwan? Um, they're all watching, and once again, not good optics, not a good image of resolve from the top leadership of the United States.
yeah. So again, I have to just disclaim that a lot of what I'm saying I don't even believe, but I'm more so just trying to think aloud of what is the effect of this. And I mean, some of the guys I had on retired Lieutenant Colonel Bernie Flowers the other day, who spent 20 years or 30 years in NORAD and U.S. Northcom. It
Mm.
was like there's not a bird over the United States that this thing that they don't see. So he's like, so what is the reasoning behind that? And whatever it is, I don't think it's, and not to go full tinfoil, I don't think it's whatever we're seeing. It's too simple. It's too simple of we're all just, screaming and memeing about a balloon in the air. It's maybe it really is that those as Ron Moeller, former CIA air branch pointed out, he goes, I'm not surprised because this is still the team that did Kabul. This is still
Mm.
them. Why wouldn't they drop the ball? So I don't know. But then I think it was yesterday an article came out and I haven't vetted it and I have no idea if it's true. So take it with a grain of salt. But someone saying that the recovered wreckage is all made of like US parts.
Well, there are U.S. parts contained in what they've recovered, although it seems that they've not recovered quite a bit. Um, I don't know if they'll be able to or not, but in any case, what that shows, I think, is that the Chinese have found ways around, any kind of restrictions on export of sensitive United States technology. They found ways around that, and we really need to take note of that if we're serious about stopping that kind of flow of sensitive United States technology, which could be used not just by the Chinese communists, but also how about by Iran,
Hmm.
which is building drones to be sent to Russia for use in the invasion of Ukraine, and those drones are now showing up, shot down sometimes, um, with U.S. technology parts, components within them. So our export controls need a bit of fine tuning.
Because it's been so long since we've talked, could you give me your update on what's going on in Ukraine? It's something I follow very loosely,
Hmm.
and it, not, I mean, not to disregard it, but it just kind of seems like
There's a lot going on.
it's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, they're still going at it, and like that's as much as what trickles down to average Joe like me is it's still happening. Like, okay,
Yeah,
noted.
it is still going on. After the Ukrainian counteroffensive that began last summer into the fall and late 2022, winter hit, of course, and things settled into something of a standoff. But now, just more recently, the Russians seem to have begun their much anticipated um, counter offensive, which was predicted for about the spring, coming in a while here, there, here 2023. Um, and they seem to be focused on that eastern area of the Donbass, in particular, I guess, Donetsk, the oblast, in the southern part of the Donbass. Um, Although they are not making a lot of progress. The Ukrainians are still holding them off for the most part, but they are seeming, the Russians, that is, they seem to be on a big call up, recruitment call up for more troops, and they appear to be deciding to rely less on Prigozhin's Wagner group, which was recruiting out of penal colonies and the Gulag and so forth, and they just became cannon fodder. But now an actual, call up of Russian
Hmm.
citizens has begun, and we'll see, how that goes. The Ukrainians, of course, have been requesting, in particular right now, heavy armored vehicles, tanks, and
Abrams.
there was quite a bit of discussion about, which tanks from where. It seems to be agreed upon now that the Germans are going to be sending some Leopard tanks, very high end, advanced tanks there. The British, likewise, they're going to be sending, I think they're called Commanders, their tanks, and we, the United States, will be sending some Abrams tanks. Um, so that is what the Ukrainians were requesting, and those are on their way. Now the thing is, and there's been quite a bit of commentary about this. The Ukrainians are best trained. They know the old Soviet equipment best, and what we're sending them now requires
Yeah.
training for the crews before they can operate, for example, these tanks. And that training is taking place in Eastern European countries, like Poland, and they've been at that training now. Ukrainian troops have been training for quite a while, and hopefully their training will, match up with the tanks when they arrive.
Um, Not to just keep. Sometimes when I have you on, I just kind of use you like Google. I'm just like, what does Claire think about this? But last night I was just kind of on
Please.
kind of on a whim last night, I was just reading about the Wagner Group. Actually, yeah, last night I don't know why I was just looking it up. Someone was uploading, and I just had nothing to do. Um, and again, very little I know about Blackwater and XE, and I know private military contractors are a thing and are growing. And it was reading, and with Wikipedia I never know what to trust anymore, and it kind of, so it supposes that it's Putin's private army and it can do things that the Russian military isn't allowed to do. Again, I don't know what filter and what bias I'm reading it through, whatever.
But they
um
have not. The point is, they have not performed um, to be worth, what they're all cracked up to be. Put it that way.
yeah, so what is the, and again, I guess you have to educate me on this, like why PMCs, why not just the Russian? What is the value?
Well,
Is it higher
I
end?
mean,
Is
the
it?
Russians not only are short on manpower,
Sure.
um, they also were relying on groups like the Wagner Group, which perhaps can do things in terms of war crimes. I'm
Yeah,
talking about that give the main Russian army leadership plausible deniability, right?
gotcha.
I
I
think that
gotcha.
might be part of it, but they did not. The Wagner Group did not perform up to expectations or hopes, and they are now apparently relying less on them.
So is it kind of just like the illusion of choice? Like when you find out some parent company owns both types of detergent you use, is it kind of like that? Like get conscripted or go join up in a private one, but either way, you're going to die in the grinder of Ukraine. Is that too
I guess
simple?
something like that. Sure.
Well, I guess that's just kind of a more broad question, not even necessarily about Wagner, about PMCs. Is, I always kind of imagine it as like private security for, a
Well, it's a
billionaire to.
little less legitimate than the ones that we may be more familiar with over here.
Yeah. Like I get like the private, like I've interviewed, Dale, who's in Delta for 20 years, and he talks about private security he did for like a Hong Kong billionaire, and he gets his team, and it's top dollar. They get to do whatever they want. There's no, uniform, and it's snazzy. You're traveling all over the world in a private jet. Like I get that. You look at like a Mark Zuckerberg or a Bezos or an Elon Musk or even a Joe Rogan, they all have their own teams but those kind of seem, again, in all of my lack of expertise, like more boutique, kind of smaller. It's for your billionaire about town, less of a nation
Well,
state
I mean, in the
contractor.
Russian context, and specifically talking about the Wagner Group, um, for a time there seemed to be some kind of competition, actually, a
Okay,
rivalry with Putin and the Kremlin and the official Russian army. That seems now to be fading somewhat because of the poor performance by the Wagner Group.
gotcha. Now, as we were entering, when did Russia invade? It was February, right?
February 24th, 2022.
So we're coming up on a year,
Yes.
and 14 days, so 351 days. As it's less, I guess, dramatic and novel, and it almost seems to be, again, I know we're coming sort of out of winter, so you're gonna have that natural stalemate that is, I guess, natural to any Russian war. Um, what are you looking at in like another? It's so like a year ago, if we had talked about these predictions, it was all too new. It was all changing so immediately. Now, as it seems to be condensing into a more coagulated, almost World War One ish, if you will. What do you
A
see for the next
standoff,
year?
huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you use, again, not in all of your
I think
wisdom?
it very much depends on how much of the advanced weaponry that the Ukrainians need, we of the United States and the rest of Western Europe, NATO, can get to them with the training that's necessary to go with them on an urgent basis. If we would flood Ukraine with the weaponry they need, now of course the president Volodymyr Zelensky is now asking for jet fighters,
Hmm.
because as we saw, of course, in Iraq, um, a tank is better countered by air power
Yeah.
than other tanks on the ground,
Yeah.
and they know that, so they're asking for fighter jets. Um, but the slow walking of the aid of the equipment, the weaponry that we've provided to Ukraine, I think really has contributed in great measure to the fact that this is such a slog to get the Russians out of their territory. And to counter that, it needs to be provided more quickly, but of course the training has to go with it. Again, these are Western weapons now, not the old Warsaw Pact types. But it's turned into an equation of how much can we get to them, how fast. They've got the willingness to fight. I mean, they have
Sure.
shown,
Well, sure, it's your homeland.
and they will not stop. They will not quit.
Yeah.
They will fight as long as it takes to get the Russian invaders off their land.
Well, you'll always fight harder for your homeland. It's
Sure.
just it's
Yeah.
home field advantage. There's
Yeah.
it all throughout history. You'll always fight harder for preserving your homeland than to be an occupying force or a mercenary, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I'm looking at it more as is the hope that we just keep escalating until finally there's just an agreement, a
Well, I mean, the
truce
thing is that escalating, in these little bitty step by steps is not the same thing as
as
pouring it on in one, as fast as feasible, with the training to go with it, um, to overwhelm
yeah,
and throw back the Russian invaders. The way the United States. I'm not speaking necessarily for the rest of Europe, but
sure.
or NATO, but the impression is that we've been slow walking, especially at the beginning. Maybe less so now, but it has to be provided in quantities and at a speed that will take the Russians and throw them
Yeah,
backward.
yeah,
Not just grind into it like you said, a World War I trench style warfare, but you know in sufficient quantity and quality to actually throw back the Russian invaders.
yeah. If you're gonna escalate.
Yeah,
If you're gonna do it, do it. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not sure if it worked, but kind of, I guess the surge, when was that, like 2010, 2011? The idea of adding like no, I don't think that worked, but like adding like 500,000 troops or something is to do it in a reasonable manner, right?
Hmm.
The Again, harkening back to, I guess, the air campaigns over the European and Pacific theater, it was constant escalation. It was constant Liberty ships, P-51s. It was just more, more, more everywhere you
Hmm.
look, just overflowing with, right, to put the fire out, if you will,
Yeah.
right? You don't slowly turn up the sprinkler,
Well, I mean, and
fire hose.
here's the other thing about where we're at here in the United States right now.
We
In
don't feel it.
1941, at Pearl Harbor, um, we were not geared up for World War II. We were
Yeah,
just not. But we had an industrial base that was churning out cars and tractors
yeah,
and farm equipment, harvesters and combines. So we had the industrial base, and we don't have that right now.
it's very
So
true.
they could gear up pretty quickly to turn that production from combines to tanks and planes back in the
Yeah,
40s.
yeah,
But now, because we've let our industrial base slip so badly, it's a much more difficult proposition to gear up and replace, all this equipment that we are sending over there, um, for ourselves, for our own inventory, to be ready to defend and deter any threats that are coming against us.
yeah. That's very true. Is like It'd be like if McDonald's started selling tacos instead of hamburgers. Like they have the ability. It would take a
Hmm.
minute, but they could churn out billions and billions served, right? And that was 1940, 1941, 1945. Is we were, throwing up skyscrapers and Ford cars. You just tweak it, you had a barrel to it, right? Now it's the same thing. So I guess I was looking at it more as were we choosing, back to modern day Ukraine, are we choosing not to escalate that quickly? Is there some war game theory that
In the
you don't want it
beginning,
to
I
go
think
high?
we did. Yeah,
Okay.
I think in the very beginning, like let's say the spring of last year, 2022, there was hesitancy to go all out in support of Ukraine because, for whatever reason, and again, this goes to the extremely poor quality of national security advisors and the team that Biden's got around him, they assessed that the Russians were going to overwhelm Ukraine quickly, take Kiev, decapitate the government, and go on to capture the whole country. That was the assessment. And of course, they were completely wrong. I don't know why they were so poorly prepared to understand, but they were. And it was only after a period of time and the Ukrainians showed their fighting spirit. I mean, they would have fought with pitchforks if that was all that was left to them.
Sure.
Then we started slowly gearing up and speeding up, the delivery of the weapons they needed. Missiles came early on, the harpoons, the anti-aircraft batteries, eventually the HIMARS, all of that. But it was slow walked, and I think it was because in the beginning, at least, first part of last year into, I don't know, maybe as far as the summer, when the Ukrainian counteroffensive really got going, it was not thought somehow by our senior, I don't know how they get to be senior, national security advisors, military, Pentagon, DOD, that Ukraine could hang on, and they weren't going to pour anything, into a losing cause, I guess was their thinking, and air quotes thinking.
Sure.
But now they realize that Ukraine will fight, for as long as it takes to get the Russians off of their land.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I've had on Clay Martin several times, former Green Beret. And he was like, it's not until 20 years in hindsight that he understands why the Afghanis and Iraqis, the indigenous in the mountains, kept fighting them. And he was like, now I get it. It's because
Mm,
that's their home. They don't,
mhm,
they're
mhm.
not stupid. They know that we are far more advanced. He's like, but now I understand. I think his line is like, now I understand the grandpa with the bolt action is that's
Okay.
their home and there's nothing. They have nothing
Yeah.
else. And I
Yeah.
get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Um, so could it be then? So yeah. So last spring, it might be the reason why they don't dump it all on at once is because the difference between now and 1941 is everybody's armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, and that is you can't escalate, you can't go total war anymore. It's a bad idea. But now, so we're kind of theorizing that it's because we're unable to. For a third option, I would say, how can we tie in the balloon incident with this? If we know we're capable to shoot it down and our own leadership won't, is it that there is an ineptness? Is this a psychological aspect that we can but won't arm the Ukrainians? Is there
Yeah. I
something
mean,
more
this
to
is
it?
a
We're getting into wild speculation. I know that, but
no, but there's reason for it. We were talking about optics, and the optics that are being provided to the rest of the world, as I said before, is that the current leadership in Washington, D.C., whether you're talking about the White House, the National Security Council, the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, and the Pentagon, are just the weakest that we've probably ever had in the history of the United States. And it's visible, it's obvious, it's perceived by the entire rest of the world. And so for them, a Xi Jinping, a Vladimir Putin, even a Kim Jong Un, the mullahs in Iran, this is their chance. This is their chance, because they know that things will turn around in Washington D.C. eventually, and other leadership will rise up that will be a lot tougher to deal with than the pile of limp spaghetti that we're dealing with now. So this is their chance. This is their window. That's what they see. That's what they perceive. And at the same time, like I said about the Chinese and the balloon, they're taking every opportunity to show, to display the United States as weak, and our leadership as unwilling, even to do what the preamble to the U.S. Constitution says: provide for the common defense, and by that demoralize the United States population, we the people, demoralize us, degrade, debilitate our faith and our trust in our own leadership, This is corroding us from within. Other of our institutions already have been uh, corroded from within. Think about academia, think about entertainment, Hollywood, think about sports, think about public health. Um, and now it's our military, uh, maybe one of the last institutions that still had some measure of public confidence in it, and the White House, of course, which didn't have much confidence left at all at this point. But the psychological impact of that is to debilitate the morale of the American people. I think. Remember Yuri Bezmenov, the
Mm-hmm.
KGB defector, who spoke on so many different interviews after his 1972 defection, for years thereafter. Um, and he spoke about the four stages of taking over. And he was talking about communism, of course, but it applies. The first was demoralization, then destabilization, then chaos, or a crisis, and then finally what they called normalization.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we're certainly in the first and the second of those, the demoralization and the destabilization of our society, of our various sectors of society, as I mentioned before, academia, media, public health, and so forth. Um, they're infiltrating and corroding those from within without ever even at this point deploying a single tank, ship, plane, or troop. Balloons, okay, yes, but there's been no invasion. But this is what's meant by unrestricted warfare in
Yeah.
terms of the Chinese, anyway. The Chinese Communist Party, unrestricted warfare is taking pages right out of Sun Tzu. Warfare by any other means than kinetic. But that's what we're looking at.
So it's not as simple as this administration's weak so much as this has been the long march
That's
of
part of it.
unrestricted
Yeah.
warfare, Marxist philosophy, and subversion.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's not that we're dumb with our pants around our ankles. It's even worse, as Ken Clisby would say, it's willing accomplices.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly what it looks like. That's what's it's intended to give the impression of to the rest of the world by the Chinese, by the Kremlin.
So is there any so if by that measure the entire thing is or large portions of it have been captured, that would include the voting apparatus and infrastructure, which I would imagine it's not too big of a jump to say, then there is no voting it out.
Well, there
So
is, and I
okay,
think we just showed that in the November 22 elections, in which the House changed hands and is now led by Republicans.
sure,
Uh,
yeah, fair enough.
so it is still possible, and it's certainly even more possible at local levels, state level, county level, district, precinct, on down to the local level. And that's been happening all over the country at those local levels. Remains to be seen, what'll happen next year with the 2024 presidential elections, but we do still have a republic. And remember what republic means. It's from two Latin words. I think we've talked about this before, yeah? Res publica. Res means the thing, publica, public, the public thing. What is that? Well, it's the law. And in our case, that means the Constitution and the laws derived from it, Article 6 of the Constitution. And that is still there, and people know it's still there.
Hmm.
We just have to up the game a bit.
So and I hate saying this because I feel like everyone said this about every election for the last eon, and it's this next election it's all this or nothing.
Oh, it's critical. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, at a certain point, you gotta wonder, how deep does the hatred of someone like Trump go? Or it's a luxury to hate him when the stock market's doing okay, right? But when there is no southern border, when there is incursions of sovereign airspace with no response, and there's widespread censorship still being unchecked,
Hmm.
you gotta wonder, how much do they really hate Trump? Is it all the way to, is it a virus where you just walk off the cliff?
Well, it is hatred of Trump, yes, to be sure, and that's very deep. But it's beyond that. It's what Donald Trump stands for.
Yeah.
He stands for make America great again, and that means Article 6. The restoration of our foundational principles in the Constitution, those Judeo-Christian principles that have been flouted and walked all over so badly. He stands to reinstall those, or not reinstall, but revive and restore them. And that's what the deep state. That's what all of these who are enemies of this republic and of our foundational principles, Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and everything stated in them. They're against all that. But so it's not just against Donald Trump, the man, it's what he stands for and has shown that he is pledged to defend and to restore, make America great again.
Do you think it would have a better chance of succeeding if it wasn't Trump carrying the torch? And by the way, I'm not for that mindset. I'm not for appeasement, but just as a
I don't
mental
see
exercise.
anybody else with his, first of all, record of credibility, because he's already been
Sure,
through, a full administration of 4 years.
fair enough.
I don't see anybody else of his stature right now. His popularity
Yeah,
within the American public,
yeah,
broadly speaking.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, he can.
I mean, unlike the Democrats, I would say that the Republican Party has quite a nice, respectable bench. And I can see that there are others who will come up behind Trump, 28, 32, and so forth, on and on. A Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, of course, comes to the top of the list. You think of a Tom Cotton in, what is it, Arkansas, right?
Yeah,
Arkansas. You think of a Carrie Lake, who had her election up and stolen from her for governor of Arizona, would today be governor there. But she's another one. Kristi Noem in governor of South Dakota, and we could name more. So the Republicans do have quite a bench that they can turn to and draw on. But I think this time it's Trump. It's for Trump. He needs to finish what he began.
yeah. He does have the. He certainly has, for as much as people hate him, on the flip side, he also does have a following that's pretty insane for a guy out of office. I'm pretty sure at any given moment he could still go on tour and
Oh, he's
rival.
going to start
Yeah.
probably pretty soon, is what I hear.
I mean,
Yeah.
but even like, yeah, last year he goes to a random city. I mean, it rivals like the Beatles. It is not like him or
Yeah,
hate
I know
him.
what you mean.
Yeah,
The
that's
respect that people have for him, the love. I mean, it really is love that people have for him, beyond just respect and admiration, but a longing that he can return and finish the job of restoring this republic.
yeah, and it's for anyone you don't have to like him. I mean, but just turnout is turnout. It's an objective fact. Go look at the crowd. It's nuts. You don't have to like it, but it is nuts. Um,
It's
yeah,
a
and
phenomenon I've never seen the likes of before. I mean,
sure,
the popularity of a Ronald Reagan, for example, was probably the biggest thing up until that time, in the
yeah,
modern era, anyway.
yeah.
But this goes way beyond that.
Yeah, it is almost like a weird kind of rock star status. But and then it maybe doesn't even need to be as lofty as restore the republic so much as it can just be start moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Like when you're dieting, I'm gonna lose 10 pounds this month, and then after a week you're like, let's maybe aim for like a pound a month, and that's still good. And
Uh-huh.
so but we're coming up on an hour.
We are.
Is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd like to touch on?
I think we've really covered
I
the
think we
gamut
bang,
for this week anyway.
I think we
I'm
banged
sure
on
there'll be more
everything.
to bring up next week.
All righty. Well, Miss Clare Lopez, everybody go follow her on Twitter, go follow her social media, check out her websites, her writings, her articles. I'll put all that in the description as I always do. And I will see you next week, and we'll
Sounds
stop
good.
we'll stop with the hiatus. We'll get back to
Okay.
our regularly scheduled programming.
Sounds good.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Tommy.
much. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming on. God bless everybody.